This week on Jerusalem Dateline, Lebanon on the brink. Will Israel's northern neighbor fall into the hands of the Iranian-backed proxy Hezbollah? Plus, Israel shows what your next delivery from a local restaurant might look like. And a relic from the Middle Ages surfaces from the Mediterranean. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. As we have reported, Israel's neighbor to the north, Lebanon, continues its spiral into a failed state. Corruption, political paralysis, and lack of basic necessities like food and fuel plague the country that was once called the Switzerland of the Middle East. CBN's Gary Lane examines the latest developments and the danger Lebanon's plight now poses to Israel and the Middle East.
Is civil war coming to the Middle East? Tempers are raging and violence is rising in the tiny biblical nation of Lebanon. 7 people were killed when gunfire erupted in Beirut. It came after Hezbollah and Amal militia members rallied against a Christian judge who was leading an investigation into the August 2020 Beirut port explosion. Well, joining us to explain what this may mean for Israel, the United States, and the Middle East is Greg Roman. He's director of the Middle East Forum. Greg, it's good to talk with you again, so please give our viewers some context here. Why this recent violence, and is it the start of another Lebanese civil war?
I think the most honest and reliable person in Lebanon today is Judge Tariq Bitar. He is the individual who has been leading an inquiry into the devastating Beirut port explosion that took place a little over a year ago, when 1/3 of the city of Beirut was almost leveled. Not due to an intentional act by any surreptitious forces where they might have blamed Israel or they may have blamed the United States, but because of the sheer incompetence of the previous Lebanese government that had decided to stockpile tons of ammonium nitrate next to a fireworks factory, and eventually a chain reaction set that blast off, which when you looked at it, you could have perhaps mistaken it for a small nuclear device. Now, a year and a half later, after the query has really started moving forward, and Judge Bitar is moving forward with trying to indict, investigate, prosecute, and eventually bring to justice those officials who are being investigated for acts of gross negligence, all of a sudden, because of the fact that the main minister who would have been implicated in this act came from a Hezbollah-related political party, we now see members of the Hezbollah terror organization marching again on the streets of Beirut, threatening other Lebanese minority communities. The main target of their ire is the judge who's investigating their political allies. Now, this has not stopped Judge Bitar from going forward. And a coalition crisis under interim Prime Minister Najib Mikati has now led to the point where Hezbollah is calling for blood for those who were only defending themselves on the street of Beirut in those attacks which took place last week. So right now we're on the precipice of, I don't want to say it's going to be a civil war, but definitely an ethnic action that may take place, or an ethno-religious action that may take place as Hezbollah is looking for revenge.
And it seems like Sunni and Druze and Christians are united in this against Amal and Hezbollah. This week, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah threatened Samir Jaja's Lebanese forces, saying Hezbollah has 100,000 fighters ready to take up arms. Is Nasrallah miscalculating, or is this just political theater?
I think at the end of the day, Nasrallah is speaking from a position of strength. It's not just that he has 100,000 fighters. He also has the support of Syria and Iran. So before anything happens with trying to find a way in which to get out of this mess that Hezbollah has currently found itself in after having lost 7 of its supporters of the terror organization on the streets of Beirut last week, you have to take into context that Nasrallah does have the backing of much greater powers than him when he makes threats. They are not empty.
And he still has tens of thousands of missiles on the southern border targeting Israel and communities across the border. If extensive fighting begins, how likely is Hezbollah to attempt to draw the IDF into the fray by attacking Israel?
Well, this has happened twice in the past. Once in the 1976 beginning of the Lebanese Civil War, and also in the 1982 First Lebanon War between Israel and Lebanon. It was really between the Palestinians in Lebanon and Israel. But that was where the Hezbollah movement was born, out of that first round of fighting. I think that you have to take into context that if Nasrallah has to face Sunni, Druze, and Christian opponents locally, and he tries to deflect by letting off the Lebanese rocket valve, or the Hezbollah rocket arsenal, which can act as a pressure valve for him, by launching attacks against Israel. Israel has threatened to turn southern Lebanon into a parking lot. This is just something that was said by a top IDF general, where he estimated that an excess of 2,000 rockets could be expected per day to land on Israel in a future Lebanon-Israel conflict. And it won't be a war between Hezbollah and Israel. It'll be a war between the state of Lebanon and Israel, since Hezbollah effectively controls Lebanon. So Nasrallah is playing with fire if he thinks that he has the ability to threaten Israel, to even attack Israel and to get away with it. I'm not sure how the other ethnic groups and religious groups factor into this. But if they see an opportunity to fell Hezbollah, they may sit this conflict out if it ever happens with Israel, and let Israel do the hard work.
Coming up, Innovation Israel, using drones in ways we never could have imagined. Military drones have been filling the skies over troubled regions for years, and the race is underway worldwide to make them more relevant in everyday life. One pioneering effort is here in Israel, and as CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl reports, it's being called part of a fourth industrial revolution.
These drones are completing a special mission as they land in Tel Aviv, delivering sushi from Japanica restaurant some 7 miles away in Herzliya.
You can see multi-drones taking off, doing delivery, coming back, land, finish the delivery process, everything autonomously.
This drone could be the delivery truck of the future. One just like this delivered ice cream from Jaffa to the beach in Tel Aviv. Alon Abelson is CEO and co-founder of Highlander, a drone and unmanned traffic management solution that helps keep skies safe for this growing technology.
There is no pilot involved, no one is flying the drone, and you still need someone to make sure that the drone flying avoid collide between themselves, landing safely in the right location.
These are among the first commercial drone deliveries in central Israel and the city of Tel Aviv. It's the third of 8 stages expected to reach new heights over the next 2 years. It's being managed from the Ayalon Highways Control Center that's usually managing traffic on the ground.
We started from 0 flights 2 years ago, 700 flights in the first year, and now we're close to 9,000 flights. So we're definitely progressing even faster than we predicted.
As part of Israel's Innovation Authority, Daniela Partam leads the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution.
Our aim is to enlarge the ecosystem, so add more cities, more urban areas. In order for this to be an economically viable system, we would have to enable larger drones flying longer distances in order to deliver heavier goods to more areas.
Joined by the Civil Aviation Authority and Ayalon Highways, the project is a collaboration between the government and 16 local and international companies.
Each company has its own business case, but our goal is to create the regulatory and technological infrastructure for them to be able to do that in an economically viable ecosystem.
The various companies work together towards solutions in key areas, ranging from air traffic control and flying the drones to deliveries and security. Libby Bahat from the Civil Aviation Authority says he sees opportunities and challenges.
We are a crowded country in terms of airspace. We have high security needs. These are challenges, but I think we know how to approach them.
Despite the challenges, Ayal Bilia from Ayalon Highways explains why drones are a good and timely idea.
The lower airspace is unused today. So we're trying to open the lower airspace in order to deliver all kinds of goods and deliveries from one place to another. And by that, we're going to reduce traffic on the highways.
According to former General Yoeli Or and current CEO of Can-Do Drones, the Israeli military has been using this technology for 10 years.
So we take it from the military side and adapt it for our needs in the civilian sides.
Working along with security and air traffic control, Can-Do can manage up to 250 drones at a time.
We connect different drones from different companies, from different mission, to our system, and we control them from one laptop. First of all, you save time, you save money. The police have drones now. The fire control, they have drones. So the drones have to speak with each other.
The founding members of Airways came from the Israeli Air Force. CEO Eyal Zor explains how these experts in airspace management make it all work.
We are using advanced AI algorithms in order to manage a dynamic airspace of drones. We try to mimic like the traditional aviation, like air traffic controllers and pilots, with our system in order to show that we can operate maximum number of drones in a dynamic urban city.
Deliveries are currently limited to between businesses, given the need for a drone landing pad. The order is placed through an app, then prepared, loaded on the drone, flown to the delivery site, collected, and taken to the customer. Daniel Rachamim heads up Mishlocha, one of the most popular and fastest-growing food delivery apps here. Until now, Mishlocha has delivered mostly food and relied on conventional delivery methods like scooters. As a technology company, though, Rachamim says he's always looking to the future.
We don't have any doubt that the next stage will be the drones, because this is the best way, the fast way, the safe way to move things from one side to each other.
Flytech is the aerial operator, and company vice president Yahav Price says the drones can transport a delivery weighing about 4.5 pounds.
This is the first time in Israel you can see this kind of project, which means the first time we fly drones with no eye contact through a computer, like another UAV.
Though the demonstration focused on getting ice cream to waiting journalists, Price says the vision reaches much further than just food delivery.
This is a platform to show that technology is there and safety is there. We want to provide much more important things to our civilians, like big orders, machines, and medicines.
We are doing a great progress, and today we are writing the cookbook for economic airspace of deliveries.
Hospitals and medical facilities could be big winners with these deliveries, receiving life-saving materials quickly with no traffic jams. And consumers in the future will likely benefit in ways we haven't even imagined. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Tel Aviv.
Up next, what the Spanish Inquisition more than 500 years ago has to do with Jewish immigration to Israel today. Immigration to Israel seems to be bouncing back to pre-COVID-19 pandemic levels. According to figures from earlier this month, more than 20,000 Jews have already arrived this year. And if they keep coming, that puts the number of Jews returning to pre-COVID levels from 2010 to 2018. But there are some Jews that would like to come but aren't able to yet because of an historical link that goes back more than 500 years. That link is the Spanish Inquisition, an ugly chapter in the history of the church. It lasted more than 300 years, spanned continents, and became one of the most extreme examples of anti-Semitism ever seen. But why is the Spanish Inquisition still important today? CBN News Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl traveled to Portugal just before COVID to find out.
They're called B'nai Anusim, or sons of the forced ones. That's because they face the choice of converting to Catholicism or death.
It's something in the Jewish world that I don't think, apart from what is happening here, I've ever heard about it, or not 10 years ago, about the plight of the Jewish people from the time of the Inquisition. And it's easy to understand that because it was, of course, 500 years ago.
Jimmy McClintock joined Christians and Jews in Portugal to pray for the B'nai Anusim. The hope is to restore their Jewish heritage so they can immigrate to Israel.
For the Jewish people in America, you're either Jewish or you're not Jewish. The B'nai Anusim is different from that. The B'nai Anusim today, being confronted with the realization that they are Jewish, and yet their family life took a huge turn 500 years ago.
King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella initiated the Spanish Inquisition to expose Jews who converted to Catholicism but secretly kept their religion.
Either you convert or you die. So they never gave, Jewish people, these descendants, the option. But these descendants, they chose to keep their Judaism in secret, and it was a risk. And many of them died because of that. And they paid a high price for keeping to their origins and to their faith.
Castelo de Vida is a quaint Portuguese town of about 5,000 people. It's about 10 miles from the Spanish border. Hundreds of years ago, when the Spanish Inquisition started, Spain's Jews fled across the border here for protection. Over about 4 years, King Manuel I of Portugal welcomed some 120,000 Jews to his country. In 1496, however, the Catholic Church demanded King Manuel deal with his Jews before he could marry the daughter of King Ferdinand in Spain.
First, he thought he would ship them out, like the Jews were kicked out of Spain in 1492. And then he realized that if he does, he's got nobody to administer his country and to run the country. So he forced to convert them in one day.
One of the places that happened was this town square. The Jews were rounded up and brought here from the Jewish neighborhood, sprinkled with water and given new names. Afterwards, they were sent to new homes in Christian neighborhoods. At the time, many of Portugal's Jews fled to newly discovered Brazil, where an estimated 60 million of their descendants still live today.
And they want to know more about how to reconnect to the Jewish people and to the Jewish faith.
They include Mateus Gamaraias and his father Marcelo, who started the first of its kind museum about the persecution of the Jewish people during the infamous Inquisition.
What is happening is that today we have thousands, if not millions of Brazilians that know that they are descendants from Jews from Portugal and Spain. And I believe the Lord is doing an awakening, and these people want to know more about their heritage.
But they face a situation similar to their ancestors.
The Orthodox establishment in Israel, they want to convert them to Jewish Orthodoxy, which is exactly what the Catholic Church did. They forced them to do something they don't want to do.
Israeli Joe Shulam, who started the Nativia congregation in Jerusalem, is leading the immigration campaign for the Bnei Anusim.
These people say we are Jews. We never stopped being Jewish. We were Jews even when we knew that if the church catches us and tries us in the auto de fe, we could be burned alive. They converted on the outside, and at home in secret they kept Jewish customs.
The smallest things could give them away, like preparing on Friday for the Sabbath or Jewish holidays. According to Shulam, the challenge is convincing Israel to change its law of return. It currently states a Jew who converts to another religion is automatically disqualified from immigrating to Israel.
They have kept their Jewish customs for 500 years on their own free will, at the pain of death and torture. So why now force them to convert?
Shulam and others believe this return to Israel would fulfill biblical prophecy.
God says through Obadiah the prophet that the Jews from Sepharad, I'm a Sephardic Jew, the Jews from Sepharad will come back to the land with God's blessing and settle the Negev. Israel has been trying to settle the Negev for 70 years. It's still empty. The Negev is waiting for these Jews.
Isaac Herzog, chairman of the Jewish Agency, tells CBN News discussions are underway on how to handle immigration of the Bnei Anusim.
This is a major issue because it also has to do with legal issues, historical issues, but yes, I'm very much looking forward to an enhanced policy together with the government in Israel on this.
The vision is big. Shulam says they hope to eventually bring 2 million of these Jews back to Israel. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Castelo de Vida, Portugal.
Still ahead, an Israeli scuba diver discovers a 900-year-old treasure in the Mediterranean Sea, adding a puzzle piece to the history of the Holy Land. Israeli archaeologists say a scuba diver salvaged an ancient sword off the country's Mediterranean coast. And as CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl reports, experts say it dates back to the time of the Crusaders.
Israeli Shlomi Katzin was scuba diving in the Mediterranean Sea off the northern coast of Israel when he discovered the 900-year-old sword.
The most interesting thing is that this is one of the first, or as I know, complete sword that ever found in Israel and in a very good preservation. We know that usually under the water, the materials, the archaeological materials survive better than on land.
Katzin also found stone anchors and pottery fragments on the seabed. The finds were apparently uncovered by the waves and undercurrents that shifted the sand. Fearing the sword could be stolen or swept away by the currents, Katzin took it ashore and turned it over to the Israel Antiquities Authority. Katzin received a certificate of appreciation for good citizenship.
Because of the area where the sword was found, not so far from the Crusader castle of Atlit, with a Templar castle during the early 13th century, we are assuming that it belonged to the Crusader period because of the size, because of the other artifacts that belong to the site.
The Crusaders captured Jerusalem in 1099 AD and set up their kingdom here. They ruled the area of the Holy Land for nearly 200 years.
Following the weight of the sword, we assume that the knight that hold this sword was very strong, because to fight with this weight and this size of sword, it wasn't so easy. Even today, to hold it, it's heavy.
The sword has been sent to the IAA laboratories in Jerusalem. Researchers will X-ray it and begin to clean off the encrusted shells and ocean debris. Then they'll decide how best to preserve it. The IAA says every artifact that's found helps to piece together the historical puzzle of the land of Israel. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, that's one more story piecing together the history of Israel. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And you can also access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And don't forget to sign up for our email blasts so you can continue to receive all of our exciting CBN content. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time.